This is a 2007 Bentley Azure. When this car was new back in 2007, the base price was $331,000. This one was $350,000 with options and shipping, which translates into $413,000 in today's money. Right now, it's listed for sale by Exclusive Automotive Group, the excellent Bentley Aston Martin dealer in the Washington, D.C. area, for $102,888, meaning that this car has lost $313,000 in real value in just 10 years. That's $31,000 a year, or just under $2,600 a month, every month for 10 years. In fact, if you were to assume this car's depreciation curve was linear, it loses $3.61 in value every hour. And since this video has started, it has already lost 6.1 cents to depreciation. Today, I'm going to take you on a tour of a car that cost almost $350,000 10 years ago, and today you can buy it for no more than the cost of a nice Mercedes. As usual, I'll start this tour with a look at all the unusual features and cool quirks of the Azure, and then I'm going to take it out on the road and find out what it's like to drive this car, which, by the way, only has 19,000 miles on it, meaning that it cost the previous owners $16 per mile in depreciation to own this car. Then I'm going to give it a Doug score. For more of my thoughts on the Azure, click the link below to go to autotrader.com/oversteer, where I've also compiled a list of luxury cars currently for sale on AutoTrader that have depreciated more than $200,000. I'll start with one of my favorite quirks of the Azure, the fact that Bentley really knew its customers for this car. Namely, they knew its customers would be very old, very rich people who would get stressed out if they were looking at all sorts of buttons to control all sorts of functions. And so in this car, they've hidden virtually every interior button behind wood panels. You want to get to the radio? Well, that's behind a wood panel. You want to get to the climate controls? That's behind a wood panel. The ashtray, that would be hidden behind a wood panel. And even the controls for the heated seats are hidden behind a wood panel. That way you can close all of these panels and you don't have all these complicated buttons staring you in the face, so you can pretend they just don't exist as you waft down the street in your Azure. Speaking of those old people customers, this was one of the very first cars ever to have a full color LCD screen in the middle of the gauge cluster. It was certainly one of the first ones I ever saw with that feature. It came out back in 2005 or 2006 with that, and at the time it was really high tech. But Bentley didn't want to confuse its old people customers with that newfangled screen, so they kept everything pretty familiar and pretty comfortable. For example, the little arrow that lights up when you put on the turn signal, they could have done anything with that. They could have made it any shape, any size, but they decided to leave it exactly as it was if it had been a light. Just now it's part of a full color screen. One of this car's coolest features is right here in the middle. Now, as you'd expect, there are buttons for all four windows to raise and lower them, and there's a button to drop the top, since this is, after all, a convertible, but there's also one extra button, and it is the coolest button of all. The button right here that lowers all the windows with the press of just one button. But every vehicle should have this. It's so easy, it's such a good idea. Here's how it works. Another neat feature is right here on the door panel, where you'll notice that there are two door handles. There's one here and there's one here. Why is that? Well, the front door handle is for the front seat occupant to open the door and climb out. The back door handle is so the rear seat occupant can reach forward and open the door. And check this out. When you pull the rear door handle, the front one pulls too. But when you pull the front door handle, the rear one doesn't pull. I'm not really sure why that is, but it's certainly a quirk. For our next interesting Azure quirk, we turn to the transmission selector. Now, on the top of the transmission selector, the Bentley B logo is used. You push it and you can select the gear. That in itself is kind of cool. But the really cool thing about this transmission lever is that when you slide it over to plus-minus mode, sport mode, the B sort of goes into the shift lever as you slide it over, because you don't need to select the gear anymore when you're in plus-minus mode, and because it feels sportier. This is the kind of thing no one is ever going to notice except for me and now all of you, but it's the kind of attention to detail I really love from high-end luxury cars. Next up, you approach the trunk to this car and you realize, how do you get in this thing? There's no keyhole. But there is. It's hidden under the B in the winged Bentley logo. You call it a gimmick, I call it something your car doesn't have, unless you have a 1994 Nissan Altima. Next up is a feature that a lot of high-end luxury cars have, but also one that I just couldn't finish this video without showing you. That would be the headlight sprayers. Check them out. Another interesting thing about this car you'll notice the second you get inside, especially if you're a car enthusiast, is the incredibly low red line. The tachometer only goes to 5,000 RPM and the red line is somewhere around 4,600 RPM. That's because this car is geared for ultra low end torque, so you really feel like you're moving, you get some muscle. But it looks like a diesel when you get into it. You'll never see another gas-powered car with a red line that low. It's really impressive. Next up, we have to talk about maybe this car's most distinctive feature, and that would be its size. That's because it is massive. Allow me to take a trip from the front to the back. This car is 212 inches long, which makes it a foot longer than a Chevy Tahoe, and yet it's only got 2 doors. So what exactly is in all that 212 inches? Well, a lot of stuff that makes this car a lot cooler than the one you drive. For example, your car probably has heated seats, most newer cars do, but this car has 6 stage heated seats. That means there are 6 different settings to warm yourself with the seats. If, for example, your butt is not quite warm enough on number 4, well then just turn it up to number 5. Ah, that's better. More still, number 6. Last 2, 3, 1, you can choose from them all. Now, who exactly can distinguish between butt warm setting number 3 and butt warm setting number 4? I'll tell you who, the kind of people who buy an Azure. Now take a look at this little panel here and you'll notice all the usual controls, the backrest, you can move it forward, backward, get your memory controls, that's easy enough. You also have this little button here. That would control the massage function. Yes, this car will massage you. Now I know a lot of high-end cars have that feature now, but they didn't back in 2007. Now, some other Azure improvements over your boring everyday car can be found in the trunk. To open the trunk, press this little button next to the steering wheel and it automatically pops right open. You come back here and you'll notice 2 especially interesting things. Number 1 is the fact that this trunk is carpeted in this nice blue and it has these grab handles for you to shut it. Grab handles are not that uncommon, but these are finished in leather with these chrome strips at the end so that you know you're in a Bentley. Maybe more hilarious is the fact that the emergency inside trunk release, which is usually this really cheap latch, in this car, it's this really heavy, big 2-columned latch. They even give you a more luxurious way to get out of the trunk if you've been kidnapped and stuffed inside. Another hilarious little detail that makes this car just that much nicer than a normal one is the fact that there are no abbreviations inside this interior. In your car, when you try to turn on the headlights, there's probably a little icon that looks like a headlight. In this car, it says head. When you go to look at the fuel situation in this car, it doesn't say E and F and make you wonder what E and F stand for. It says empty and full. Bentley doesn't bother with simple abbreviations, chintzy ones. Those are from Mercedes-Benz and Audi. Next up, let's talk about the fuel cap. Now in your car, you probably have a crappy little plastic fuel cap that'll break apart at the easiest touch. Not in this thing. This car has a really nice metal fuel cap. I wish you could feel how heavy this thing is. It also has the Bentley B on it, and it's designed in a way to facilitate you easily turning it closed. It is the best fuel cap in the world. But while this car does have a lot of cool features that even a normal brand new car doesn't have, there are still a few items in this car that remind you, yes, it came out in 2007. For instance, when you turn on the radio, oh, yes it does. Yes, it does. You won't find that in any modern car. Now, my personal favorite old school feature in this car is the key fob. This car came out right before the key fob revolution, where they're now really tiny and they have a million functions. This one is large. It is surprisingly big, takes up a lot of space in my pocket. It's really heavy. And in spite of that, it only has 2 buttons on it, lock and unlock. Can't do the trunk, can't roll down the windows, can't start the car. And the other old school feature that you just can't help but kind of laugh at in the Azure, hidden in here in the center console, that would be the Bentley phone. Yes, that's right. There's an in-car phone with a winged bee logo on it. Now, I personally think that in 2007, even by then, we were already starting to get away from car phones, but the kind of person who bought an Azure probably thought that made him the coolest guy in the world. So those are all the cool quirks and features of the 2007 Bentley Azure. Now it's time to get this thing out on the road and see how it drives. Driving the Azure. I've always wanted to drive one of these because this is like the convertible. This is like the most opulent, aside from the Rolls-Royce Phantom drophead, this is like the most opulent, like, I don't want performance, I don't want excitement, I just want to waft around in this giant car. You gotta respect somebody who buys one of these. Not only do they lose the depreciation, but they just don't care what you think. You know, they could have had a Mercedes SL and it would have been similar in experience, and they were like, no. We're gonna do this right. The first thing you notice, as you notice in all these really high-end luxury cars, they're just so insulated from the road. And you go over a bump, and it bumps a couple times. It takes a little bit for the suspension to level out, but you don't feel the harshness that you do in some cars. I've always wanted to check out one of these cars because it's just the most opulent. I mean, this thing is gigantic. I'm here next to a Volkswagen CC, and I parked our front ends next to each other, and my rear end sticks out. It's got to be 2-3 feet back there, but I have less doors. It's never made any sense. This car is just not for people who think in those terms. People think, all right, what's the best? What's the ultimate? And then they end up with one of these. All right, I'm doing manual mode. Ooh, whoa. Wow, it's actually not slow at all. Putting it in manual mode and kind of downshifting a few gears really makes this car feel a little bit more exciting. I'm surprised. It also has some sound to it, which is shocking. I'm on kind of a curvy road here, and boy, this is so cool. It's not fast curves, it's like sweepers, and that's what this car is designed for. It just wafts around these sweeping corners so silently and quietly. And, oh, effortless, total effortless. I mean, a car just went by and you barely hear the wind noise from that car. You don't hear any wind noise from your own car or tire noise. I mean, that stuff has all been eliminated, which is quite impressive considering I'm in a soft top convertible. This thing is just designed for the most comfortable cruising that you can imagine. The steering is so light. There's not as much body roll as I was thinking there would be, but clearly driving dynamics were sort of a secondary thought to, you know, luxury. This level of comfort and refinement is just a step above the S-Class, and it's just not that easy to attain that. This car, as I've often said, is the kind of car that's for people who have been in S-Classes their whole lives and they want the next step above that. And they're willing to pay a lot of money for that because there's the exclusivity factor and the serenity is just unrivaled. You look out over that hood ornament too, and it's hilarious. You feel like you're the king of the road. And the reason you feel like that is because you are the king of the road. Car enthusiasts watch these videos and they say, oh, I would never have 100 grand, I could buy a 911, I could buy a GTR. But at some point you get to an age where you've had all cool cars your whole life and you just want to hang out and relax. And that's the 2007 Bentley Azure. It's a car that's full of interesting quirks and unusual features and a wonderful, relaxed, serene driving experience. But maybe the best feature of all is the fact that it now costs only $103,000 for the flagship Bentley convertible. That's a pretty good deal, and you can drive it now without worrying about all that depreciation that the first owners had to deal with. Never mind the fact that it's lost 90.2 cents in the time that it's been sitting here while I've been filming this video. Anyway, on to the Doug score. Starting with the weekend categories and styling, the Azure is a handsome car, but I don't think anyone would call this behemoth beautiful. Still, it's better than average, earning a 6 out of 10. Acceleration is good for a car this size, but its 0 to 60 time of 6.3 seconds means it earns a 3 out of 10. For handling, the Azure is good, surprisingly secure, but still so wafty and vague with such light steering it doesn't enter the realm of a sports car, and it earns a 5 out of 10. Cool factor is debatable, of course, but I think these are really cool. Buying a Bentley sedan is one thing, but spending this much money on a Bentley convertible with only 2 doors, well, that's pretty cool, and it earns a 7 out of 10. Importance, however, is a little lower. These cars aren't valued highly in the used market, and while they may be cool, they're not especially significant, so it earns a 6 out of 10. That brings its total weekend score to 27 out of 50, which isn't so bad, and it's probably accurate. If I had a garage of fun cars to drive on the weekend, this wouldn't be my top choice. Next up are the daily categories, starting with features. The Azure is well equipped by the standards of its day, but this category measures cars with today's standards, and a power antenna and massaging seats won't get you very far. It earns a 5 out of 10. Comfort, however, is another story. The Azure is relaxing and supple and luxurious, and it easily earns a 9 out of 10, falling just short of a perfect score because its convertible top lets in a little more noise than an enclosed luxury car. Quality measures reliability and materials. Materials are excellent, but reliability is a bit of a question mark. It earns a 7 out of 10. Practicality is reasonable. 11 cubic feet of cargo space is pretty good, and rear seats are acceptably large, though not big by any standards, and that gives the Azure a 4 out of 10. Finally, value. When it was new, this score would have been very low, but now that this thing is around 100 grand, it's a lot more appealing, and it gets a 6 out of 10. That gives it a total daily score of 31 out of 50, which is pretty good, and about right given its immense comfort and luxury. Added up, and the total Doug score is 58 out of 100, placing it right in the middle of the pack. It's no sports car, but for an ultra-luxury cruiser with a convertible top, few other cars will do. There's not a, you know, you can point the 2007, another blah, 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 blah. If only it still worked, I'd try to figure out a way to use it. I bet at the very least you could play Snake on it or something. Pretty cool, huh?